Big Liz, The Cook Slave and the Plantation Bet, 1854. Part 1. The South, the Bet and the Marriage. The year was 1854, and the American South was at the height of its plantation power. Cotton, rice, and sugar flowed from sprawling estates worked by thousands of enslaved men and women, while their masters basked in wealth built upon chains. It was a world of rigid social rules, white supremacy enforced by law, custom, and the whip. But even in a society hardened by cruelty, there were acts so bizarre, so humiliating, and so shocking that they lingered in whispers long after the Civil War ended. One such tale was that of Big Liz, an enslaved cook whose life and death became both history and legend. The world of the Southern plantation. Plantations in the Deep South were not merely farms. They were kingdoms, ruled by wealthy white landowners who measured their worth in acres of land and the number of enslaved people they owned. In the antebellum years, slavery was not just an economic system. It was the backbone of society, defended fiercely by those who profited from it. The plantation house was a place of excess. White families dined on imported china, drank French wines, and displayed their luxury as proof of status. But behind the grandeur was the constant, unseen labor of enslaved workers, cooks, housemaids, field hands, who kept the machine running under the lash. Among these enslaved workers, the cook held a peculiar position. She had direct access to the master's family and the power to shape daily meals. A skilled cook was invaluable, able to prepare feasts that impressed guests and reinforced the master's prestige. Yet cooks were still enslaved, still subject to abuse, humiliation, and control. The plantation owner. According to legend, the man at the center of the Big Liz story was one of those wealthy, arrogant plantation owners whose cruelty was matched only by his pride. His name varies in different tellings. Some say Captain Williams, others Mr. Smith, but the details remain constant. He was a man of immense landholdings, wealth, and ego. At plantation gatherings, men like him drank, gambled, and bragged about their power over both land and people. These were men who saw enslaved people not as human beings, but as pawns to flaunt, trade, and degrade. And it was during one such night of drinking and boasting that the cruel bet was made. The bet. In 1854, at a gathering of plantation elites, the owner was teased by fellow planters for his arrogance. They accused him of having no limits, of being so proud that he would do anything just to prove he could. Fueled by whiskey and wounded pride, the man declared he would do something so outrageous that no one could question his daring again. He would marry his enslaved cook. The cook was none other than Big Liz, a woman already known across the plantation for her towering figure and formidable strength. Descriptions of her vary, but all accounts agree she was tall, heavyset, and imposing. She worked tirelessly in the sweltering kitchen, lifting heavy pots and preparing endless meals for the household and guests. To the planter men, the idea was scandalous and hilarious. To enslaved people, it was terrifying, another example of how their bodies could be used as entertainment, stripped of dignity. Big Liz. Big Liz herself was no stranger to cruelty. As a slave, her life was dictated by the whims of her master. She had little say in what happened to her body, her labor, or her fate. But being chosen as the centerpiece of this grotesque bet was beyond humiliating. Enslaved people whispered about her with a mix of respect and pity. She was known as strong, capable of outworking many men, but also cursed with the unwanted attention of her master. Now, her strength and size became the butt of a cruel joke. The marriage was not born of affection, nor of respect. It was born of pride, mockery, and the desire of wealthy white men to display their dominance, not just over enslaved people, but over society's very norms. The forced marriage. The story says the wedding was staged on the plantation itself, with white planters invited as guests. Some accounts claim a preacher was bribed to officiate. others that it was a mock ceremony done for laughs. Big Liz was dressed up not in fine silks, but in humiliating attire meant to amuse the white audience. She was paraded before them as though part of a circus act, her dignity stripped away. The master boasted, laughed, and took his vows, declaring before his peers that he had married his slave cook. The guests roared with laughter, clapped, and toasted. For them it was entertainment, a wealthy man mocking the sanctity of marriage, the dignity of a woman, and the humanity of the enslaved all at once. For Liz, it was degradation. She had been forced into a union she did not want, with a man who saw her as both property and spectacle. Shock across the South. Word spread quickly. Even in a society that treated enslaved people as property, the forced marriage was seen as scandalous. Other planters whispered behind the man's back, calling him reckless, crude, and shameless. Women of high society were horrified that a white planter would publicly marry a slave. But there was no justice for Liz. No one defended her, no one intervened. The South may have gossiped about the owner's outrageous bet, but they all shared in the same system that allowed her humiliation. For Liz, daily life became even more difficult. She was no longer just a cook. She was the butt of endless jokes, mocked by the master's peers and treated as a symbol of his arrogance. And yet this strange marriage could not last forever. The owner had proved his point, won his bet, and amused his peers. But once the laughter faded, Liz remained a reminder of his excess. In a world where pride and reputation meant everything, she became a burden. And in the cruel logic of slavery, burdens were not tolerated. The foreshadowing of death. Whispers began to spread among the enslaved quarters. Men and women who had seen what the owner was capable of knew that Big Liz's days were numbered. He had used her to win a bet, but now her existence embarrassed him. There were rumors of secret meetings, of men gathering late at night to discuss how to dispose of her. Enslaved people reported seeing the master watching Liz with a cold, calculating stare. Liz herself seemed to know her fate was sealed. According to oral history, she warned others that her life would be short, but if she died, she would not rest. She would haunt the man who humiliated her. And soon her warning would come true, the marriage's aftermath and the silent betrayal. The marriage between the plantation master and Big Liz was never meant to be a union of love. It was a spectacle born of arrogance, cruelty, and the desire to shock. But when the laughter of the guests faded and the gossip moved on, the consequences of the bet settled like a heavy weight upon both the master and Liz herself. Life after the wedding. On the plantation, Liz was still a slave. She was still expected to rise before dawn, tend to the fires, and spend her days sweating in the kitchen preparing lavish meals for the white family. The title of wife meant nothing. It gave her no protection, no dignity, no freedom. The enslaved workers whispered with pity and unease whenever she passed. Some avoided her, fearing that even acknowledging her humiliation would bring punishment upon themselves. Others offered quiet sympathy, stolen glances of compassion, whispered prayers at night. But Liz herself carried her head high, even in disgrace. She had no choice. To show weakness in front of the master would only invite more cruelty. She worked as she always had, her powerful arms stirring great iron pots, her hands shaping bread and roasting meats for the family table. Yet behind her strength, there was an unmistakable sorrow. The master's dilemma. For the plantation owner, the marriage had served its purpose. He had won his bet, silenced his rivals, and amused himself with the scandal. But now, Liz's presence was a constant reminder of his own recklessness. Neighbors sneered behind his back. High society women refused to visit his home. Even fellow planters, men who owned and abused slaves themselves, regarded him as crude. To admit regret would be weakness, something he could not afford. But to continue living with Liz as his wife was a burden to his reputation. Slowly, the master's demeanor toward Liz shifted. Where once he boasted about her, he now treated her with cold disdain. He mocked her, humiliated her in front of the household, and began plotting a way to erase his mistake. Liz's growing fear. Liz, perceptive and strong, recognized the change. She knew her life was hanging by a thread. Enslaved people were property, disposable at a whim. If the master wished her gone, no law, no neighbor, and no court would stop him. She confided in a few trusted slaves, warning them that something was coming. According to oral tradition, she told them, "If he kills me, I won't rest. I'll come back. I'll haunt this place until justice is done." Her words carried weight. In African American folklore, spirits of the wronged often lingered, seeking justice or revenge. Enslaved people believed that Liz, with her size, strength, and indomitable spirit, would not simply disappear. The night of the betrayal. The legend says that one night, the master ordered Liz to accompany him to a remote part of the plantation, near the swamps. He claimed he needed her help to bury valuables, gold, silver, and treasure that he wanted hidden away in case of slave uprisings or Union attacks. Liz obeyed as she always had, though unease filled her chest. She carried the heavy trunk, her massive frame straining against the weight. The master walked behind her, silent, his mind fixed on what was to come. They reached the swamp. Liz lowered the trunk, her hands caked in mud. She began digging, her strength carving a hole in the earth. All the while the master watched, gripping the handle of his knife. When the hole was deep enough, he ordered her to place the trunk inside. She did, and as she straightened up, sweat dripping down her brow, he struck. The knife cut deep. Liz staggered, clutching at the wound. She turned toward him, eyes wide, not with shock but with knowing. According to legend, her final words were a curse. "You may kill me, but I will not rest. I will haunt this land, and you will never have peace." With brutal efficiency, the master finished the deed. He shoved her body into the hole beside the treasure chest, covered it with earth, and walked away. Silence on the plantation. The next morning, Liz was gone. The master claimed she had run away, escaping into the night like so many others. He spread the story quickly, warning the enslaved not to mention her again. But they knew the truth. They had seen the look in Liz's eyes before she disappeared. They had heard her warning, and in the nights that followed, strange things began to happen. The haunting of the swamp. Enslaved people spoke of eerie lights flickering near the swamp where Liz had been buried. Some said they heard her footsteps in the mud, heavy and deliberate. Others claimed to see her figure, tall, broad, and glowing faintly, walking among the trees. The master himself was not spared. He reported nightmares, visions of Liz standing at the foot of his bed, her eyes burning with fury. He grew paranoid, refusing to go near the swamp, ordering his slaves to avoid it as well. But the hauntings only grew stronger. Visitors to the plantation claimed to hear unexplained noises at night, chains rattling, a woman's voice whispering, footsteps packing the halls. Dogs howled at nothing, horses reared in fear. Liz's spirit had returned, just as she promised. The curse of Big Liz. The legend of Big Liz spread across the South. Enslaved people whispered her story as a warning that, even in death, the wronged could not be silenced. White planters, terrified of their own sins, used her ghost as a cautionary tale. Some stories claimed that Liz guarded the buried treasure, ensuring no one could ever claim it. Those who tried to dig near the swamp said the earth shook, strange winds howled, and Liz herself appeared, her towering figure blocking their way. Others believed she haunted not just the swamp but the entire plantation, a restless spirit bound to the land where her blood was spilled. Either way, her curse lived on, the treasure, the curse, and the legend. The murder of Big Liz did not erase her from the plantation. Instead, her presence became stronger than ever. Death, in her case, was not an end, it was a transformation. From an enslaved woman mocked and humiliated in life, she became a force of fear and defiance in death. Whispers of the treasure. After the master buried Liz with the trunk of treasure, he believed he had secured both his wealth and his silence. But his decision to bind gold to a curse was a fatal mistake. Soon, enslaved workers began whispering about the chest. They said Liz was buried with it, her spirit bound to protect it for eternity. They told one another never to seek it, never to dig near the swamp. Yet greed is a powerful thing. As years passed, after the war ended and the plantation system crumbled, freed men and desperate scavengers searched for the rumored treasure. They crept into the swamp at night, carrying shovels and lanterns, whispering prayers to ward off Liz's spirit. Few returned unshaken. The first treasure hunters. The earliest stories describe men who came to the swamp shortly after the Civil War. One group claimed they knew the exact spot where Liz had been buried. They dug until their shovels hit something hard, the chest. Excited, they pried at the lid. But before they could open it, a sudden wind howled through the swamp. Their lanterns went out, plunging them into darkness. Then came the sound, heavy footsteps in the mud, slow and deliberate. One man swore he felt a massive hand on his shoulder, icy cold, gripping with impossible strength. Another screamed that he saw Liz's face rising from the earth, her eyes glowing red. They fled, abandoning their tools, and never returned. The story spread, reinforcing the belief. Liz would not let anyone take the treasure. The master's fall. As for the plantation owner who had orchestrated Liz's death, his life unraveled. Haunted by guilt and visions, he drank heavily, lashing out at anyone who crossed him. He spoke of seeing Liz's figure in mirrors, in shadows, even in broad daylight. At times, he ranted about her standing at the swamp's edge, waiting. Neighbors said he became a broken man, paranoid and half-mad. His wealth dwindled, his family abandoned him, and the plantation rotted. In the end, he died alone, babbling about Liz. Some claim his last words were, "She's here, she's coming for me." His body was buried, but many whispered that Liz had claimed his soul long before. Liz's haunting grows. Long after slavery's end, locals continued to fear the swamp. Children dared one another to walk near it at night, but even the boldest refused to linger. Strange sounds, dragging footsteps, whispers in the dark, the distant clang of chains echoed across the marsh. Fishermen reported seeing a tall, broad figure on the banks, watching silently. Travelers swore they heard a woman's voice calling their names. Some claimed Liz's spirit would even follow those who mocked her story. Men who laughed at the tale often found themselves waking at night, drenched in sweat, convinced someone was standing at their bedside. Folklore and memory. The story of Big Liz became more than just a ghost tale. It became folklore, passed down through generations of African Americans as a tale of justice and power. For enslaved people, Liz symbolized resistance, proof that even in death, one could fight back against cruelty. For the white South, she became a figure of fear, a reminder of the sins buried in the land itself. Some saw her as a guardian of justice, others as a restless spirit doomed by betrayal. But all agreed, Liz's story was not to be taken lightly. Modern sightings. Even in the 20th century, people claimed to encounter Liz's spirit. In the 1930s, a group of young men from town went to the swamp in search of the treasure. They reported that their car refused to start after they arrived. Then, from the shadows, they heard a deep, rasping breath, though no one was there. Terrified, they left, only for the car to start perfectly once they reached the main road. In the 1950s, a hunter claimed to see a huge woman walking among the trees, though she left no footprints in the mud. In the 1970s, ghost hunters claimed to record strange noises near the swamp, thudding footsteps, distant screams, and what sounded like a woman laughing. To this day, some locals avoid the swamp entirely. They say Liz is still there, guarding her treasure, waiting for anyone foolish enough to disturb her rest. The legend lives on. Big Liz is not remembered only as a victim. In folklore, she became a force of vengeance, a protector of stolen wealth, and a symbol of strength. Her story represents the cruelty of slavery, the arrogance of power, and the way injustice leaves a stain that never fades. The plantation may be gone, the master long dead, but Liz remains a towering shadow in the swamp, a curse whispered from one generation to the next. They say if you visit on a moonless night, you can still hear her breathing, heavy and steady, as though she is standing just behind you. And if you dig in the wrong spot, you might feel her hand close around your arm.